if I personally have a private piece of land and I hire a bunch of people and they're like, hey, there's no restaurants anywhere. What do we eat? And I go, all right, I guess I'll have the crew come and open up a restaurant, but you got to pay for the food. Is that communism?
No, that is not communism. In fact, that would be the opposite of communism. Communism would be they didn't have to pay for the food, right? And they wouldn't be working for you. They would be collectively working towards a goal, because communism is ultimately about a stateless society, or something which is communal.
I mean, again, monopoly capitalism isn't really.
But hold on, this is not an issue of there's no competition. Like it's an issue.
There is no.
No. I mean, it's an issue of there's no competition, not forcing people to do anything. So is the alternative? I just go, you know what, guys, I'm going to open a restaurant where only I get to eat. You're actually not allowed to eat it because I don't want to be a communist.
Right, but this is the same argument as to why people would own like an entire water supply. Right. So if you privatize water, then no one has a right to the water.
But I'm not talking about that. I'm saying
a company town could own the water.
That's true. Now, that is another classic critique of libertarianism. This classic critique comes in with, well, what's actually stopping you from saying you own the air, which exists on your own private property? Under classic libertarianism, nothing. There's no particularly good reason that they could give you for why it would be on your private land. You couldn't charge people for literally breathing the air on that private land. It's private, right? Same thing with water sources. One of the classic critiques is you could potentially, in your spot of land from a run-through river or something like this, actually dam it off and begin taking that water supply. And is that theft? These are very, very classic criticisms of libertarianism. At least, like pure form libertarianism. There's all different forms of libertarianism, just like there is communism. But for kind of the libertarian purist, this is a very, very classic critique.
Indeed. What right do you have to take it? That's communist.
It's not communist to have public municipalities.
Wait, what?
It's not.
I own a swath of...
That's true. It's not. It is not communist to have public municipalities, and it's not communist to have public resource sharing. That's not communism. People get this mixed up often. So communism and libertarianism are tails and heads of the same coin. They're both affirming the same basic idea, but how they accomplish it is completely radically 180 from each other. Both believe that there should be a stateless society, ultimately. Some of them may say you can have, communal towns where you elect a government, things like this, but ultimately the idea of having a stateless society is the goal of both. The communist affirms this by saying that there should be no private property whatsoever. Absent private property, everybody's working towards the communal good. The libertarian is giving the opposite end of the coin, and they're saying, no. The only way that this can work is through the affirmation of private property. So we still want the same stateless society, but we want there to be 100% private property ownership, and people can self-govern based on the fact that they own property. So they're both coming at this from a different angle, but I've always considered it heads or tails. They are 180 degrees from each other, but only because of this issue of private property. That's where the rub is with communists and libertarians. And by the way, that's a huge rub. Don't get me wrong. It's the basis of the entirety of the ideology.
Of land.
Right.
And I invite you to come work on it.
Right.
I have to now relinquish my right to the water body on my property?
No, I'm saying if you're going to create a society or civilization and if you own the entirety of
We're talking
the
about company
supply,
towns. We're talking about company towns.
That's the beginning of a civilization, right? It's no different.
Right. So the point you're bringing up is that if I own, let's say, 100 acres, and I have a grain mill on it, and then I can't produce that much, so a handful of people are like, "Howdy, good sir, we could in."
I'm not wrong here. I'm 100% right here. Both are moving towards self-governance in lieu of a government. One is affirming that with private property, and the other is saying no, private property is what destroys that concept.
Increase the output of the grain if you let us come. And I say, all right, you know what? I'll pay you guys a share of the grain that you mill. Thank you for voluntarily coming and offering this service. They then say, there's nowhere to eat for miles. And I go, well, unfortunately, if I were to create something by which you could purchase food, that would be communism. So no.
It's not communism.
So then if I as the landowner and the company owner then say, I will open a restaurant on the property for you, from which you can purchase goods, that's the beginning of communism.
So, but you're...
No. That would not be the beginning of communism. No.
describing a situation of a small microcosm where there's no competition.
Like a company town.
Right, where there's no competition.
Uh-huh.
Doesn't capitalism require competition?
And who's stopping people from opening a restaurant across the street?
Which is a fine critique. So I think that Tim's critique here is fine. His criticism here is, no. You can still compete. It's just nobody is competing. That seems fine to me. Like I don't see a problem with the criticism here. So the idea here from him is like, no, this could still be capitalism. And so Jay says, but this is a microcosm. You're just talking about a place where nobody is competing, not that they can't compete. And Tim's like, yeah, they can compete. They just aren't competing. So maybe they're talking past each other a little bit.
Well, you would if you have a company.
No. If I own property and
you said
say,
monopoly capitalism, you would be then stopping the competition in a monopoly capitalist situation.
No. We're talking about a company town, right? Mm-hmm. Privately owned property.
Right.
So do they have to relinquish their water rights?
If it grows to a certain size where you begin to have competition,
that's literally communism.
No, it's not.
Seizing the assets from the private landowners.
No, I'm
literally.
Nope, that's not communism either. So a lot of people don't know this. Inside the United States, and again, Jack can fact check me here if I'm wrong, but I think on most private property in at least many states, this is the case, that the government owns the mineral rights on properties for certain minerals. And if it's the case that it comes up that these minerals appear on your property, they can indeed seize them. That isn't actually communism, though. The idea that the government can come in for the benefit of the nation and seize certain assets would not be communism. You might say it's not pure capitalism, and I would agree with that, but what is it? It doesn't have anything to do with communism itself. Marxism is a specific lens in which to view the world. It's an entirety of an ideology. So this is neither communism nor I think libertarian. I think we're kind of moving into just kind of talking past each other at this point.
Going to a guy who owned land and says, there's too many people here now, so your water is ours. That's communism.
Sounds like communism to me, Jay.
If you grow to where you have a society that requires competition,
then the people can seize your assets. Agreed. We're communists.
If there's
that's not communism. That has nothing to do with communism. Communism is moving towards a stateless society. This would just be like, this would be the opposite. It's almost be like ultra authoritarianism, maybe. They just like come in and seize they take all your, that wouldn't be communism. Now, under communism, you could have redistribution policies, which may be indistinguishable from ultra authoritarianism or something, but that in and of itself is not communism. Having public works and things like this, it's not communism. Mineral rights is not communism. Having free open waterways is not communism. Eminent domain is not communism. None of that's communism. That's socialism. It has elements of socialism. But remember that the socialist lens is focusing on the idea that the state itself is going to seize the means of production in order to move it to the worker. That's the idea. The state's going to seize the means of production, give it to the worker. That's stage one of communism. In this case, it is true that the state is seizing the means of production on private property. So if you want to say that that's socialism, I suppose you can. But it doesn't seem like the goal of that is to move it over to the worker, which is what socialism is. That's what its intent is, right? So just because the state seizes your property or seizes the means of production itself, that wouldn't be socialism unless the entirety of the means of it was to try to somehow give it to like a worker co-op or to the workers. That's the whole point, right? Like the state seized this giant Fortune 500 company, and it allowed the workers then to vote who they wanted the new CEO in, and they set their own salaries and blah blah blah. That would be more like socialism. I should be a Rumble mod, Batman says. I don't know. Ask the Rumble mods. They might make you a mod. I don't know. Beekster says for 50, in company towns, competition was run out by force or excessive fees. But how would that be contrary to libertarianism? Even if it's the case that you owned a town and it's private property, why couldn't you run out competition? I'm not sure if it's the same in the US, but in Canada, when you buy property, you can sometimes be eligible to buy the mineral rights associated with that property. I'm not sure. I've never tried to buy mineral rights, so I have no idea.
First of all, by the way, Marx was a libertarian, so it gets really.
Well, we're not talking about. I don't care about Marx.
Marx was a
Well, you're accusing me of communism, then that.
No. I'm not accusing you. I'm arguing
that the argument is communist.
If your argument is private land ownership is void upon excess population, that's literally a function of communism. That's what the Venezuelans did.
What you're describing.
This is kind of sneaky language, though. A function of communism. Okay, well, so what? Like you can associate all sorts of things in capitalism as being a function of communism. Communism itself is ideological. Socialism itself is ideological. Libertarianism itself is ideological. Capitalism also becomes ideological when you start to talk about the ebb and flow of what kinds of capitalism you should have, because it usually begins to pertain to rights.
Is literally just communism itself. A company town is essentially the same as a communist setup. That's
it is not.
It is identical.
I don't see how it is. I'm not sure how it is exactly.
It's completely not.
I don't know. It's not.
So the people own the land
in a company town.
In a company town, the people are the people. No. The people have. If we're talking about the structures of communism, by which there is a private committee, and there's two ways we can look at it. Your argument.
Communism doesn't need to have private committees either.
Seems to fuse together both the authoritarian dictatorship components and the economic.
That's monopoly capitalism. That's what you're arguing for.
If the argument is.
Jay's right. Monopoly capitalism would fuse those same elements. No, he's right. Jay counters and says, what you're arguing for right now fuses those same elements called monopoly capitalism. That's a fair point.
People can voluntarily choose to come and work for a company, but there is no competition because there's no market reason for it. It's not communism. It's just a monopoly, but there's no oppression, and it doesn't matter because you can always choose to leave.
You can always choose to leave if you're out in the middle of nowhere.
Why did you go there?
In the West. And then
again, bro, I got to tell you, if the argument is I have no choice in my circumstances, therefore I should get public rights, it's literally
That's not what I said.
This guy's a communist.
So then leave, right? Why can't you leave?
Well, you can say that, but in a company town, especially like in situations when in the 1800s company towns are being set up, you didn't have the ability to just leave, right?
Why not?
Well,
they're holding you at gunpoint?
I mean, well, if you're under a contract.
Well, this is a rub here, right? Kind of. So a lot of these company towns, they did have these contracts where you would incur debt. And they made sure to cost and price things in such a way where they knew that what your actual, pay would not be enough to accommodate against the debt that you would perpetually owe. And it's how they kept workers there in perpetuity. I consider that dishonest swindling. Like, literally consider that dishonest swindling. And I think that that's the point Jay is making here.
You might have to be there.
Why did you sign the contract?
Well, again,
is it communism to voluntarily enter into an agreement with a company?
Yeah, but you can call it voluntary. Even there's situations where something can be voluntary that you're actually locked into, right? I mean,
You chose to enter into a contract.
If Amazon owns an entire area.
Yeah, but you can choose to enter into immoral contracts, and I think that those contracts should be able to be voided due to the fact that they're immoral. You know, like what if you entered into a contract to be a servant, for instance? Let's say that was legal to do. I would argue that that's an immoral contract and that there would be a moral obligation to actually break it due to the immorality of the thing itself. $50 from Beakstar. A person couldn't choose to leave company towns because you could afford to leave company towns via script versus real money. Good point.
And it's the only place to work, then to say, well, you can move and you can do that.
Can.
Yeah. But it's still a form of wage slavery, right? You don't think there's such thing as wage
No, I don't.
slavery?
I think that's commie talk.
Well,
I think this is quite literal.
I don't think he would think it's commie talk. The idea that you can be exploited as an indentured servant or as a servant or something like this due to the bad financial means that you find yourself in, or the fact that you used to have cross-generational debt, things like this, I think you can make good arguments against why you don't want any of that in society. You know, like, let me give you an example of modern day wage slavery, a very immoral system which currently exists, which should be stricken off the face of the earth tomorrow. And that's like payday loan centers. Payday loan centers are one of the most predatory things that I've ever seen in my life. They park themselves in areas where people have, they know the job systems in these areas are essentially going to guarantee that people working paycheck to paycheck are going to enter into catastrophe. When they enter into catastrophe, they're going to, in desperation, turn to one of these payday loan centers, and then they end up in this perpetual cycle where they're charging 3, 4, 500% interest, and they mask it by saying, "Okay, hey, I'm going to give you $600, right? I'll give you $600 now, and you only have to pay back $650 in 1 week," not realizing that that's like hundreds and hundreds of percent interest. And yeah, that is peak usury. I agree. Now, I don't agree that just loaning money at interest is usury. I think that's absurd on its face. But I think that would fit any definition of usury that you could ever come up with. And that is a form of wage slavery. It really is.
Literally the arguments of Chavez and the arguments of Bernie Sanders. And my point that I often bring up to these leftists is, what's stopping
payday loans messed me up for a little while. Anybody who's ever been caught in that cycle understands exactly what I'm talking about. They understand exactly what I'm talking about. These guys will end up collecting many hundreds of dollars more than they ever loaned you in a very, very short amount of time. And it's like, one way that you could curb that easily is by setting the interest rate incredibly low, like forcing a very, very low interest rate. I think that's fine. I think we can govern society that way. I have no problem with it. I'm not going to not do that because you think I'm falling afoul of some ism. Well, it's capitalism. We can loan what we want at whatever interest rate we want. No, you can't. You
from just being a vagrant on federal land?
There's no difference.
You want from my system without input. And that is the component of the left that I disagree with.
No, your argument is a leftist argument, actually.
That people should have to work.
Classical liberalism is a leftist position. You argue classical liberalism. That's a classic leftist position.
I'm arguing for merit-based capitalism is leftist.
Yes. Classical liberalism out of the Enlightenment.
That is incorrect.
No, out of the Enlightenment, classical liberalism is leftist.
The origin of the left is the left aisle in the French Revolution, referring to those who wanted a socialist, anti-monarchist, and the right.
Got to be careful here. So I think that he's probably historically correct, but the left is going to be utilizing foundationalism, right? There's going to be foundations that they're pointing to which actually predate the ideology in the modern ideology of leftism. And Jay, I suspect, is going to attack that foundationalism. That's Jay's the way that he argues and the way that he kind of pounces on his opponents is to go directly after those pillars of what, okay, doesn't matter historically where the modern term left came from. What's the foundation that it's resting on? Payday loans seem designed to be the price of a poor person's paycheck. They are actually designed that way. Before they open those up, they'll actually look at the demographics of the area and what the average pay is, and they'll set their benchmark of how much they'll loan to be exactly the max of it, the max of what they would commonly find in that particular area.
Wanted a top-down monarchist system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so your argument...
Not in the French Revolution, no.
It was the French Revolution. It was the left and the right.
The French Revolution wanted a constitutional monarchy on the right, and they wanted private property on the right. The leftists wanted communism.
Indeed.
In the French
so
Revolution.
when we say left and right in an economic sense, it refers to left meaning communal, right meaning closer to laissez-faire.
That's classical liberalism, which is against the traditional position of church and state.
Tim, this is the argument that Carl makes about liberalism now.
What's the argument?
Carl?
That Sargon of Akkad. This is I'm only saying that they're similar. That liberalism is actually a creation of the left, and that the ultimate form.
But I am not advocating for, in this circumstance, classical liberalism. I'm advocating for private rights.
Yeah, but the only point that I'm making is that his perspective is similar to Carl's perspective. You remember?
Sure, but that's immaterial to the argument being made.
It's not, because what you're saying that you're a socialist, you're a Marxist, but what I'm arguing would be the same as any medieval village philosophy, and they weren't Marxists or socialists back in the Middle Ages. Like if you went to a French village in the 1100s.
You're okay. Again, if the core of your argument is there's a private landowner, 20 years later, there's now 300 people working in this land. Mm-hmm. We now transfer the private rights from the landowner to a communal function.
Again, it's complex when you have something like the total ownership of something like a water supply, right?
Yep.
So when you have people that need that, that's different than a situation where Nestle's trying to buy an entire country's like private water supply.
So again, the issue is company towns. I have 100 acres. I own the body of water on that land. Mm-hmm. I invite a bunch of people to work. They say, I'll work here. I need a place to stay. I say, I'll build you a house. They say, where do I get food? I'll build a store. And they say, we need water. I say, I'll set up a water pump for you. That's communism?
Well, let's go to the rights then, because you're arguing that you have this right as a company owner, and I would agree. But on what basis do you have those rights? Because classical liberalism lost this whole argument when it came.
I don't know why you're bringing up classical liberalism. It's not.
That's your position.
No, it isn't. It is.
You're not aware of that, but it is your position.
No, you're throwing a blanket to encompass one point and combine it with a bunch of other points.
Because your arguments come out of that ethos, whether you know it or not. They're classical liberal arguments.
And you can have varying ideologies, mix and match. Let's make an argument on what I actually just said.
What's the basis for the rights?
The basis for the...
If Tim is smart here, he'll just say God. If Tim is smart, he'll just be like, God's the basis for rights. If Tim doesn't say God's the basis for rights, he's going to be in big trouble quick.
The right to own private property. Well, now we're...
your ethos.
So I argue that the rights of man are derived from the will or the duties God bestows upon man.
Smart. Smart. So at least we're getting somewhere. This isn't going to work with Jay Dyer, but that's that's his only move there. Basically, his only move there is God. There ain't no other move. There ain't no other move you can make. Like, if we're looking at the debate chessboard, you know what I mean? There's only one move he can make there, and it's God. Like, well, rights come from God. Okay. That's where they come from.
The requirements that we have from God, which is be fruitful and multiply, requires a handful of things for which we recognize in the United States that we allow other people to do.
Wait a sec. That's going to be pivotal. God says to be fruitful and multiply. Our God says be fruitful and multiply. Does Tim's God say be fruitful and multiply is the question.
Fully recognizing that other groups have different ideas of what rights are. So I would argue rights are we need to be able to communicate, we need to be able to protect ourselves, and we need to be secure in our possession.
Okay. We're talking about what rights are, but Jay's asking for an accounting for them.
These are principal rights that we struggle to survive without. As the basis of this is look at communism in general in the Soviet Union. And when you don't have property rights, congratulations, look what happens. When you have mass monopolization and oligopoly, you get something similar. So in as simple as my moral worldview and faith-based structures that define what I think someone has an inherent claim to, progressives think you have an inherent claim to someone else's labor, which I would describe as slavery. So when it comes to the idea of private land ownership, the argument is fully understanding population expansion can come to a point where some people will never own land. But the idea is I need to be secure in my possessions to know and prepare for harsh winters, for instability, so that I can survive, so that I can be fruitful, and that I can multiply.
So you appeal to Genesis and God. What God? What?
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
What principles of Genesis tell you that?
What are you talking about?
You're building your genesis of belief in God. Which God? Which faith? What is informing that faith? Where did we get be fruitful and multiply from? That's a Christian specific teaching from our Bible.
I'm not a Christian.
Then
Well, bro, earlier he said the command from God is to be fruitful and multiply, but now he says he's not a Christian. Where the are we getting the command to be fruitful and multiply then? Where are we getting the command to be where's that coming from?
how are you going to base this argument for rights in God?
What do you mean?
What God?
My God. My moral worldview.
So it's not a universal principle, it's just subjective?
Can y'all please just take Timmy under y'all's wing and help him grow in debate? Tim is super effective in normie political spaces. Help my boy graduate to the next level. He's also actually a great debater. He's just not great when it comes to normative claims. Now, many of you may think I just said normal claims. No, that's where he excels. Normative, philosophical, moral, normative.
Well, I think to a lot of people, they have a moral worldview and a philosophical understanding of some things and not others. And I base mine largely on, first, I would argue that perhaps there are greater moral philosophies than the Christian moral structures. We just don't know them yet.
That's genuinely confusing to me. Listen to this again.
I base mine largely on, first, I would argue that perhaps there are greater moral philosophies than the Christian moral structures. We just don't know them yet.
What? What Tim just said here, you have to realize doesn't actually make any sense. It's incoherent. There are greater moral philosophies than Christianity. We just don't know them yet. Well, then how do you know that there are greater moral philosophies than Christianity? Well, I don't. Well, then what are you talking about? Like, there are human beings who can fly. We just haven't seen one yet. And how do you know that there's human beings who can fly? Well, I don't. Right. Like, what are you talking about? That was actually a bizarre statement.
I would say historically, based upon what we have seen throughout the world and what we think we know, the Christian moral worldview has been dramatically superior to other moral structures.
So the Christian worldview is superior, better than other structures, an argument I make often. It's superior to them morally, but I still believe that there are other better moral structures than that. We just don't know what they are yet. Well, then what leads you to believe that there are better ones? That would just be, he's saying this is completely unknowable, but I'm stating it as though it's factual. That's bizarre. Do we like Tim Pool? Oh, fearless leader. I love the guy. I think he's great. I've always liked Tim Pool. I've liked him since the day I met him. I enjoy debating with him, and I enjoy debating on his team, and I enjoy debating on his channel with other people. I like the guy quite a bit, but that some of the things that are being said right now don't make much sense to me.
So that being said, I'm not a Christian, and I don't believe in the faith structures they have. However, I have recognized that the moral structures of a Christian society tend to make life more successful for individuals.
Well, then, what the position would really reduce to is that until another moral structure presents itself, the best moral structure is Christianity. I can point to nothing else. I have no way to even assume that something else would be superior. I just assume that there is something superior to it. But it's a bizarre worldview. He's just Destiny shotgunning words right now. I don't know.
Which is ultimately beneficial to the standard function of life, which is organizing organizing free energy into complex systems.
So just utilitarianism, so because it works well. That was utilitarian.
You're wrong.
He's not wrong. Though I would agree in principle that Tim Pool isn't calculating utils like a utilitarian would. He's not saying that utils, he's not like associating X amount of utils to an action to determine its morality. What he is utilizing, though, is ruthless pragmatism, a more pragmatic philosophy. He's doing the because it works. And because it works, therefore it's good. The problem, of course, with this is that you could say the same thing about and point to countries right now and say, well, it works. Well, it doesn't work as good as this. Well, so what? It works, right? That's the problem with the pragmatic view itself anyway. I think Tim struggles with faith, much like I used to. Logically thinking through the Bible can be difficult, but my conclusion is it's correct and it's the best moral way to live, N1SB. Good conclusion.